The auditorium held 400 people, and my daughter stood at the microphone in front of all of them, and I did not know what she was going to say. That is the first thing you have to understand. Riley had been chosen to give the class reflection at her graduation, voted by her classmates, selected by the faculty, an honor, and she had refused to let me read the speech beforehand. "You'll see it when everyone sees it," she'd said. 3 days earlier at our kitchen table, not looking up from her cereal. That's the point. So I sat in the 7th row of the Lincoln High School auditorium in Portland, Oregon, in a dress I'd bought specifically because Riley had said it was not embarrassing, and I watched my 17-year-old daughter walk across the stage in her cap and gown, and I had no idea that in 90 seconds, she was going to say a word she had not said to me in the 3 years since I brought her home. I want to tell you about that word, and what it cost her to say it, and what it cost both of us to get to the room where she could. But to do that, I have to take you back 3 years, to the day a social worker named Diane sat across from me at that same kitchen table and told me, as gently as she possibly could, that I was probably making a mistake. Welcome back to Still Standing Stories, where the women who refuse to give up on someone finally find out it was worth it. If you have ever loved someone who was sure you would leave, if you have ever decided to stay anyway, for as long as it took, this story is for you, and I need you to hear all of it. Subscribe before we go further, because what my daughter said into that microphone is the ending of a story that almost didn't happen, that everyone told me not to start, and I am so glad I did not listen. My name is Nora Bennett. I'm 38 years old, and I'm a veterinarian in Portland, Oregon. I run a small practice, mostly cats and dogs, the occasional emergency rabbit, and I have spent my whole career doing a specific kind of work that turns out to have prepared me for the most important thing I ever did, though I did not know it at the time. I take care of the animals nobody else wants. The old ones, the ones with the behavior problems, the ones that have been surrendered 3 times because they bite, because they hide, because they have decided, based on solid evidence, that humans are not to be trusted. I am good with the ones who have given up on people. It is, I think now, the whole reason I was able to do what I did. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I was 35 when I decided to adopt. I want to be honest about how I got there, because it was not a lifelong dream. It was something quieter and slower than that. I had never married, not from any tragedy, just from a life that filled up with other things. The practice, which I built from nothing over 10 years. The animals, a series of relationships that were fine and ended fine and left me, at 35 single and settled and aware of a specific absence that I had stopped pretending wasn't there. I wanted to be someone's family, not a partner's. I'd made my peace with that being uncertain. A child's. I wanted to be the person a kid came home to. I looked into it the way I look into everything, thoroughly, with research. And what the research told me, quickly, was the thing that anyone who has looked into adoption knows, and most people who haven't, don't. There is no shortage of children who need homes. There's a shortage of people willing to take the ones who are already past the age of cute. Everyone wants the babies. I understand it. I am not condemning it. But there is a specific population of children in the foster system that ages year by year out of any real chance of adoption, and by the time they are teenagers, the chance is nearly zero. 13, 14, 15 years old, and the system has effectively given up on finding them families, and worse, they know it. They know it completely. They have done the math on themselves. Riley was 14 when I read her file. She had been in the system since she was 6. 11 placements in 8 years. 2 of those placements had been disruptions, which is the clean administrative word for a foster family deciding they could not keep a child and sending them back. Like returning something that didn't fit. Riley had been sent back twice. She had a note in her file, from a caseworker, that I have never forgotten, and that made me furious in a way that clarified everything. Riley is a bright child, but presents as guarded and resistant to attachment. Prospective families should be aware she may not bond. She may not bond. As though it were a defect in her. As though a child who had been handed to 11 different families and sent back by 2 of them had a bonding problem, rather than a completely rational and hard-won understanding that bonding was dangerous and people left. I read that line and I thought about the animals in my practice. The dog who'd been surrendered 3 times and now lunged at everyone who approached the kennel, aggressive. The paperwork said, not suitable for adoption. I had watched that dog for weeks. That dog was not aggressive. That dog had learned that when he let people get close, they hurt him or they left, and he had made a decision, and the decision was, not again. It took me 4 months to earn that dog. 4 months of sitting outside his kennel not asking anything of him, just being there, every day, until one day he came to the front of the kennel on his own and put his nose against the bars. She may not bond. I read that sentence about a 14-year-old girl and I thought, that's not a warning. That's a description of someone who has been failed 11 times and is protecting herself exactly as much as she should. And I thought, I know how to do this. I have spent my whole life learning how to do exactly this. I was wrong about how hard it would be. I want to say that clearly before I make it sound like I understood what I was signing up for. I understood the shape of it. I did not understand the size. Stay with me, because I need to tell you about the warnings, because everyone warned me, and they were not wrong to. And if you're considering something like this, you need to hear the warnings, and then hear what I learned on the other side of them. Diane, the social worker, was the gentlest. She sat at my kitchen table during the home study process, and she said, choosing her words carefully because she clearly believed them, Nora, I have to make sure you understand what adopting an older child from a background like Riley's actually involves. This isn't going to be gratitude. A lot of people go into this imagining a child who's grateful to be rescued. That's not what happens. What happens is the child tests you, sometimes for years, because they need to know if you're going to leave like everyone else. And the only way they know how to find out is to push until you either prove you'll stay or prove you'll go. It can be brutal. I've seen these placements fail. I need you to be ready for a child who may treat you, for a long time, like the enemy. I said I understood. She looked at me like she wasn't sure I did, and she was right, because you cannot understand it until you're inside it. My sister Kate was the least gentle, because that is what sisters are for. She said, flatly, over the phone, Nora, I love you, and I think this is a mistake. You're 35, you're single, you have a business to run, and you want to bring home a 14-year-old with 11 placements and abandonment trauma? Teenagers from the system are broken, Nora. I'm sorry, but they are, not their fault, but broken, and you're not equipped to fix that, and she is going to make your life hell. And then she is going to age out and leave, and you're going to be left with nothing but the damage. Don't do this. Adopt a baby if you have to adopt. Not this. She's broken. You're not equipped. She'll make your life hell and then leave. I want to tell you that I dismissed all of it, but I didn't. I lay awake with it. Kate was not being cruel, she was being protective of me. And some of what she said was statistically true. These placements do fail at high rates, and the failure is devastating for everyone. I was not naive about the odds. I went forward anyway, and I want to be honest about why, because it wasn't confidence. It was something closer to a decision I made about the kind of person I wanted to be. I decided that she might leave and she might be too damaged were not reasons not to try. They were reasons the trying mattered. Nobody needs a family that's only willing to stay if staying is easy. The whole point, the entire point, is a family that stays when it's hard. Riley had never had one of those. I could be the first. Or I could fail trying to be the first, which was still better. I decided than her having no one willing to attempt it at all. I brought Riley home on a Saturday in September. She was 14. She arrived with one bag of clothes and a backpack. I have to tell you about the backpack because the backpack is the whole story, and I did not understand that for 3 years. It was a child's backpack, too small for a 14-year-old, faded purple, frayed at the seams, one strap held on with a safety pin. It was clearly ancient, and Riley carried it everywhere. Not just when she was going somewhere, everywhere around the house, from room to room, and she slept with it beside her bed within arm's reach. In those first weeks I assumed it held something valuable. And I never asked, because I had already decided the fundamental rule of how I was going to do this. I would not push. I would not demand. I would not require her to open anything, a bag, a door, herself, before she was ready. I had learned that from the animals. You do not reach into the kennel, you wait for the nose to come to the bars. So I let her carry the backpack, and I did not ask what was in it, for 3 years. The first year was every warning Diane and Kate had given me, made real. Riley was not hostile, exactly. It would have been easier if she'd been hostile. Hostility is engagement. Hostility is a relationship. Riley was worse than hostile. Riley was polite. She was a perfectly polite stranger living in my house. She said please and thank you. She did her chores. She did not slam doors or scream or break things, not at first. She simply did not let me in, at all, in any way, and she did it with a smoothness that told me she had done it many times before, in many houses, to many people who had tried to reach her. She was a professional at keeping a distance while appearing to cooperate. She had 11 placements worth of practice. She did not call me anything. Not Nora, not Mom, nothing. She structured entire conversations to avoid needing a name for me. I noticed it within the first month, and it broke my heart in a specific, quiet way, because I understood what it meant. Naming me would make me real, would make me someone, and she was not going to let me become someone she could lose. I want to tell you more about that first year, because I compressed it, and it deserves the full weight, and because if you're considering something like this, the compressed version will lie to you about what it actually costs. The polite stranger phase was, in some ways, the loneliest year of my life, and I say that as someone who had lived alone for a decade and knew loneliness well. Living alone loneliness is quiet, and you make your peace with it. Living with someone who won't let you in loneliness is a different animal entirely. It is loneliness with a face at the dinner table. It is cooking a meal for 2 people and eating it in silence across from a child who thanks you politely and clears her plate and disappears into her room. It is saying good morning and getting a good morning back that is perfectly correct and completely closed. Some nights I would sit in my kitchen after Riley had gone to bed, and I would wonder if I had made a catastrophic mistake. Not because she was difficult, but because I had imagined, despite all of Diane's warnings, that there would be some connection, some small moment, and there was nothing, and I did not know if there would ever be. And I had committed my entire life to a child who treated me like a well-reviewed hotel. I called Diane, that first year, more than I want to admit. There was one night in particular, around month 4, when I called her nearly in tears and said, I don't think she's ever going to let me in. I think I've made a mistake. Not for me. For her. Maybe she needed someone better at this. Maybe I'm just one more house. And Diane said something I have thought about many times since. Something every person doing this kind of loving needs to hear. Nora, the fact that you're calling me at 10 o'clock at night, worried that you're failing her, that is the exact opposite of everyone who came before you. The families that disrupted, that sent her back, they weren't calling me worried, they were failing her. They were calling me to come get her. Your worry is the evidence you're doing it right. She can't see it yet, but you keep doing the things she can't see, and one day she'll see it all at once. You keep doing the things she can't see. That became my whole philosophy of that first year. Every act of care that Riley did not acknowledge, did not reciprocate, seemed not even to notice. I did it anyway, and I did it without needing her to see it. Because I understood, slowly, that she was watching everything even when she appeared to be watching nothing, and that she was keeping a ledger too, a secret one, a ledger of every time I showed up without being thanked. She was collecting evidence, just like she collected objects in the backpack, and the evidence she was collecting, without either of us naming it, was the answer to one question. Does this one mean it? I made her lunch every day that first year. She never said anything about it. I did not know if she even liked what I made. I found out, much later, in the 3rd year, that she had noticed every single lunch, that in the other houses, she often had to make her own food or go without, and that a packed lunch made by an adult every day, without her having to ask, was something she had catalogued as almost unbelievable. She told me, in year 3, you made me lunch every day for a year and I never said thank you, and you just kept doing it. That was the first time I started to think maybe you were different. Not because of the lunch, because you didn't stop when I didn't say thank you. The things they notice are not the things you think. She did not need grand gestures. She needed a sandwich, made daily by someone who didn't quit when the gratitude didn't come. She watched me constantly that first year. I would catch her studying me. Not with affection, with assessment. She was watching for the signs that I was getting tired of her. The signs that the newness was wearing off and the reality was setting in, and I was starting, like everyone before me, to look for the exit. She had learned to read those signs early, in other houses, because reading them early meant she could protect herself before the blow landed. She was watching me the way you watch weather when you have been caught in storms before, and she tested me. Diane had told me she would, and she did, and it escalated over that first year in exactly the way Diane had predicted. It started small, coming home late, not answering texts, seeing if I would get angry enough to give up. When anger didn't come, it got bigger. In the spring of that first year, she ran away. I want to tell you about the night she ran, because it was the first real test, the big one, and how I handled it determined everything that came after. She was gone when I got home from the practice.
No note.
Her phone went to voicemail, and the backpack was gone, which told me something I clung to all night. She meant to go, but she took the thing that mattered, which meant some part of her was still protecting a future. I called Diane. I called the police, and then I did the thing that I think, looking back, was the most important decision I made in 3 years. I went looking for her myself all night, and when I found her at 2 in the morning, at a bus station downtown, sitting on a bench with the backpack in her lap, not actually going anywhere, just sitting, testing whether the world would come find her. I did not yell. I sat down on the bench next to her, not touching. The kennel rule. I sat down and I said, "I'm not going to make you come home, but I'm going to sit here with you until you decide, however long that takes, because it's cold and you shouldn't be alone." She didn't look at me. After a long time, she said, in a flat voice, the most words she'd said to me at once in 7 months. "Why are you even here? You can just say it. You don't want me. Nobody keeps me. Just say it and take me back and stop pretending." And I understood, sitting on that freezing bench at 2 in the morning, what the running was. It wasn't her leaving me. It was her forcing the ending she was sure was coming, on her own terms, so that at least this time she would be the one who chose it. She was so certain I was going to send her back that she was trying to control the timing of her own abandonment. I said, "Riley, look at me." She didn't. I said it anyway. "I am never going to say that. Not tonight. Not ever. There is no version of this where I take you back. I know you don't believe me. You have no reason to believe me. Everyone who said that to you was lying, and you'd be stupid to trust it, and you're not stupid. So I'm not gonna ask you to believe me. I'm just gonna keep showing up until believing me is easier than not. However long that takes. We've got time." She didn't answer, but after a while she stood up, and she walked to my car, and she got in, and we drove home in silence. And that was the first test, and I passed it. And it bought me exactly nothing in terms of her trust, but it bought me another chance to keep showing up, which was all I wanted. I want to tell you about my practice and the animals, because they are not a side detail. They are the reason I knew how to do this. And there is one animal in particular I have to tell you about, because Riley met him, and he taught her something I never could have. His name was Duke. He was the dog I mentioned, the one surrendered 3 times, the one the paperwork called aggressive, the one who lunged at the front of the kennel. He came to my practice as a boarding case that nobody came back for, which is its own kind of abandonment, and I ended up keeping him at the clinic because no rescue would take a dog with his record, and the alternative was not something I was willing to do. I spent 4 months earning Duke, sitting outside his kennel, not reaching in, reading a book out loud so he'd get used to my voice attached to no demand. And eventually the nose came to the bars, and eventually the tail, and eventually Duke became the gentlest dog I have ever known, because he had never been aggressive. He had been terrified, and terror and aggression look identical from the outside and are opposite on the inside. I brought Duke home in Riley's 2nd year, after the hospital, when things were starting to soften, and I watched something happen that I did not plan and could not have planned. Riley recognized Duke, not consciously at first, but she was drawn to him immediately, this dog who flinched at sudden movements and hid when voices got loud and watched everyone with the wary assessment of someone waiting to be hurt. She started sitting with him on the floor in the evenings, not demanding anything from him, just being near. The kennel rule, she did it instinctively because she had lived it, because nobody had to teach her that you don't reach for a creature who's been hurt, you wait for it to come to you. And one evening I overheard her talking to Duke. She didn't know I could hear, and she said, quietly, to this dog, "I know, everybody left you too. It's okay. She's different though, I'm pretty sure she's different. She stayed for me. She'll stay for you too. You can stop waiting." And I stood in the hallway and listened to my daughter tell a rescue dog the exact thing she had not yet been able to fully believe about herself. That someone had stayed, that the waiting could stop, and I understood that she was working it out through him. That loving Duke who had been abandoned like she had been abandoned was how she was learning to let herself be loved. She could see it clearly in him, that he wasn't broken, he was wounded. And the wound could heal with enough staying. And if it was true for Duke, some part of her started to reason maybe it was true for her too. Duke is still with us. He sleeps on Riley's bed. When she leaves for college in the fall, there has already been a lengthy negotiation about whether Duke goes with her. He can't. The dorm won't allow it. And this has been the source of more emotion than almost anything else about her leaving. She cried about leaving Duke harder than she cried about leaving me. And I understood completely and was not remotely hurt, because I know what Duke is to her. Duke is the proof, in fur, that wounded is not the same as broken, and that staying works. She needed to see it in someone before she could believe it about herself. Duke was the one who showed her. The second year was better and worse. Better because the polite stranger act cracked a little. Worse because what was underneath it was pain, and pain is harder to be around than distance. She started, occasionally, to let me see that she was struggling. She had nightmares. She had days where she couldn't get out of bed. She had a temper that she'd been suppressing for a year, and that started in the safety of a house that hadn't kicked her out. To finally come out, and I welcomed it, actually, because a kid who yells at you is a kid who has decided you're safe enough to yell at. The anger was progress. It didn't feel like progress. It felt like being screamed at by a 16-year-old who told me I wasn't her mother and never would be, and she didn't ask to be here, and she hated it. But underneath it, I could hear what it really was. She was testing the ceiling. She was throwing everything she had at me to see if this was finally the thing that made me leave. And every time, I stayed. I set boundaries. Staying doesn't mean permitting everything, but I stayed, and I made sure she knew the boundary was about the behavior, and never ever about whether she got to keep living in that house. I need to tell you about the hardest night of the second year, because I've made the turning point sound like it went straight up from the hospital. And it didn't. And the people doing this work deserve to know that the breakthrough is not the end of the hard part. It was a few months after the hospital. Riley had started to let me in, and that counterintuitively made things worse for a while. Because the closer she let me get, the more terrified she became of losing me, and the terror came out as a kind of scorched earth testing that made the first year look gentle. If the first year was a polite stranger, this was a frightened animal that had finally decided to bite, precisely because it had started to care. The worst night, she said the thing that was designed to end it. We'd fought about something small, a curfew, and it escalated the way it did in those months, and she got right up to my face and she said, with the cold precision of someone who had found the exact sentence to make an adult give up, "You're not my mom. You're just some lonely woman who couldn't get anyone to marry her, so she bought a kid from the state to feel better about her sad life. That's all this is. I'm a charity project, and when you get bored you'll send me back like everyone else, so stop pretending this is love." I want to tell you that I responded with perfect grace. I didn't. I was human, and it was late, and that one found the soft place, the lonely part, the part that had wondered in the first year if I'd made a mistake, and for a second I felt the anger rise, the urge to say something back that would hurt as much as what she'd said. And I caught it. I caught it because I understood, even furious, what she was doing. She had thrown the biggest rock she had, the one specifically shaped to make me prove her right by giving up. She needed me to fail this test so she could stop the unbearable suspense of waiting to lose me. If I broke here, she'd be devastated, but she'd also be relieved, because at least the thing she'd been dreading would finally be over, so I did not break. I took a breath, and I said, in the steadiest voice I could find, "That was a really good try. That was aimed exactly right. And if I were going to leave, that would have done it, but I'm not going to leave. So all you did was tell me how scared you are that I will." I'm not bored of you. You're not a charity project. And you're going to be stuck with me for the rest of your life. Which I know is the scariest thing I could possibly say to you right now. I'm sorry it's scary. It's still true. Go to bed. I love you. We'll talk in the morning because there's always going to be a morning. And I went to my room and I shut the door and I cried. Because it did hurt. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. And about 20 minutes later, there was a knock on my door, which had never happened, and Riley was standing there. And she'd been crying too. And she said, barely audible, I didn't mean it. The thing I said, about the charity project, I knew it wasn't true when I said it, I just wanted. And she couldn't finish. And I said, I know what you wanted. You wanted to find out if it was strong enough to survive the worst thing you could say. It is. Come here. And she came into the room and sat on the edge of my bed, and we didn't say much. And after a while, she went back to her own room, and that was the night, more than the hospital. Honestly, that was the night I think she actually started to believe it. Not because I said the right words, because she threw the worst things she had, and the house was still standing in the morning. If you are loving someone through this, someone who has been abandoned, who is testing you, hear me. The cruelest thing they say to you is often the most hopeful thing happening in the relationship. They do not aim their worst weapon at people they don't care about losing. They aim it at the person they're terrified to love, to find out if the love is real enough to take the hit. Survive the hit. Don't take the bait, don't leave, and don't pretend it didn't hurt. Just be there in the morning. There's always got to be a morning. That's the whole medicine. The turning point came in the middle of the second year, and it came the way turning points often do, through a crisis nobody wanted. Riley got sick. Not a cold, genuinely sick. A kidney infection that spiked into something serious fast, the way infections can in teenagers who don't mention they feel bad until they can barely stand. By the time I realized how sick she was, she had a fever of 104 and we were in the emergency room, and then she was admitted, and for 3 days it was genuinely frightening, and I did not leave the hospital. For 3 days and 3 nights I slept in the chair in her hospital room, and I held the plastic basin when she was sick, and I talked to the doctors and translated what they said, and I was there every single time she opened her eyes. I did not go home to shower. I did not go to the practice. I closed it. 3 days, which cost me money I didn't really have, and I did not care even slightly. I stayed. On the third night, her fever broke, and she woke up around 3 a.m., clear-eyed for the first time in days, and she looked over and saw me in the chair, awake, watching her, and she looked at me for a long moment with an expression I hadn't seen on her before, and she said, "You're still here." Not a question. Something between surprise and something else. I said, "Of course I'm still here." She kept looking at me, and she said in a small voice that did not sound like the tough 16-year-old who yelled at me, that sounded much younger. The other times I was sick. In the other houses, they'd take me to the doctor and then leave me there. Someone from the agency would come. Nobody ever. She didn't finish it. She didn't have to. Nobody ever stayed. I moved from the chair to the edge of her bed. I still didn't reach for her. 3 years of the kennel rule, I didn't reach until she was ready. But I got close, and I said, "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it even though I know you can't believe it yet. When you're sick, I stay. When you run, I come find you. When you scream at me, I'm still here in the morning. That's not going to change based on how you behave, because I'm not here as a reward for good behavior. I'm here because I'm your family. That's a fact now. It's not conditional. You cannot lose it. I know you've been waiting 2 years for me to leave. You can stop waiting, I'm not the leaving kind." And Riley, 16 years old, 3 days sick, in a hospital bed at 3 in the morning, started to cry. Not angry crying, the other kind, the kind that comes out when a wall that has been holding for a very long time finally gets to come down because it has found something solid enough to lean against. And she let me hold her hand. First time, 2 years in. She let me hold her hand and she cried, and I sat on the edge of that bed and held my daughter's hand while she cried. And I thought, there you are, I've been waiting for you. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. That was the turning point. Not the end. I want to be honest, it was not a magic switch. There was another year of hard work after that night. But it was the hinge. After the hospital, Riley started, slowly, to let me be her mother. Not in name, she still didn't call me anything. The name was the last wall. The very last one, but in fact, she started coming to me. She started telling me things. She let me into the enormous grief and rage and fear that she'd been carrying alone since she was 6 years old. And I helped her carry it, because that is what I had signed up for. And it was the honor of my life. Stay with me, because I still have to tell you about the backpack, and about graduation, and about the word. In the 3rd year, things were good. Not perfect, she was a teenager. We fought about normal teenager things, curfews and grades and whether she could get a tattoo. Which, no, but the foundation had shifted. She trusted me. She let me love her. She just could not still call me mom. And I never asked her to. I want to be clear about that. I never once in 3 years asked her to call me mom. Diane had told me early on, let her get there herself. If she gets there, and if she never gets there, that has to be okay. So I made it okay. I decided that if Riley never called me mom, I would still be her mother in every way that mattered, and I would not make her feel that she owed me a word. But I knew what the word meant to her, because of what happened with the backpack. It was the spring of the 3rd year. Riley was 17, finishing her junior year, and one afternoon she came and found me in the kitchen. And she was holding the backpack, and she had an expression I couldn't read, and she said, I want to show you something. I've never shown anyone this. She sat down at the table and she opened the backpack. The backpack I had wondered about for 3 years and never asked about, and she took things out, one at a time, and laid them on the table, and told me what each one was. There was a hospital bracelet, infant-sized. This is from when I was born, she said. It's the only thing I have from before. My birth mom left it with me. There was a photograph, creased soft from handling, of a young woman holding a baby. That's her. That's the only picture. I don't remember her. She lost me when I was 2, but I have the picture. There was a small stuffed rabbit, gray with age, one ear gone. I've had this since the first foster home, when I was 6, and there were other things, a rock, a plastic ring, a movie ticket, small objects, each one salvaged from a different placement, a different house, a different family that had not kept her. 11 placements, and from each one, she had saved one small thing, and carried it in a backpack she slept next to, because those objects were the only continuous thread in a childhood that had been handed from house to house to house. This is everything, she said, quietly, looking at the objects spread on the table. This is my whole life. Every time I had to leave a place, I'd take one thing, so I'd remember it was real. So I'd have proof I existed before wherever I was going next. She looked up at me. I've been carrying it for 3 years here too. In case she had to leave, in case this house became one more object in the backpack. I looked at the 11 small objects on my kitchen table. A whole childhood of leaving, catalogued and salvaged, and I understood the backpack completely for the first time. It wasn't a bag. It was a life raft. It was the evidence a child collects when no one else is keeping the record of her, when she has to be her own historian because every adult who might have remembered her has let her go. And I said, thank you for showing me. I know what it cost you to show me this. And then I said something I had thought about carefully, because I understood I was standing on sacred ground. You can keep carrying it as long as you want. There's no wrong answer. But I want you to know, this house isn't going in the backpack. This one you get to keep. You don't have to save one object from me to remember I was real. Because I'm not going to become a place you had to leave. I'm going to be here. This is the one that stays. Riley looked at the objects on the table for a long time. And then she did something that I will remember until I die. She started putting the objects back in the backpack, one by one, the bracelet, the picture, the rabbit, and when they were all back in, she stood up and she walked over and she set the backpack down on a shelf in the living room. On the shelf, not on her back, not by her bed, on a shelf in the open, in the middle of the house, she said, I think it can live on the shelf now. Not because I want to forget, just because I don't think I need to carry it around anymore. And she left it there. For the first time in 11 years and 11 placements, Riley set the backpack down, I went into the bathroom and ran the water so she wouldn't hear me cry. That was 3 months before graduation. 3 months before my daughter stood at a microphone in front of 400 people. The class had chosen her to give the reflection, voted for her. This girl who had arrived at Lincoln High 3 years earlier as a guarded transfer student with a wall around her, and who had, over 3 years, become someone her classmates trusted and admired. That alone undid me, that they chose her, and she wouldn't tell me what she was going to say. So I sat in the 7th row, in the not embarrassing dress, and I watched her walk to the microphone in her cap and gown, and she unfolded a piece of paper, and she looked out at the crowd, and then she found me in the 7th row, and she looked right at me, and she started to talk. She said, "When you graduate, you're supposed to talk about the future. But I want to talk about the last 3 years, because 3 years ago, I didn't think I'd have a future, and someone changed that, and she's sitting right there in the 7th row, and I need to say some things while I have a microphone and can't chicken out." The whole auditorium turned to look at me. I stopped breathing. She said, "Most of you don't know this about me, because I don't talk about it. But I grew up in foster care. I was in 11 different homes before I was 14. 2 families sent me back. By the time I was 14, I had it figured out. Nobody keeps you. You're not the kind of kid people keep, so you stop hoping because hoping is how you get destroyed." The auditorium was completely silent. 3 years ago, a woman adopted me. A teenager. Everyone told her not to. I know they did, because I heard some of it, social workers, her own sister, everyone said the same thing. Don't adopt a teenager. They're broken. She'll make your life hell and then leave. And they were right about one thing. I was broken. I'm not going to stand up here and pretend I wasn't. I was so broken that for 3 years I wouldn't let her in. I ran away. I stole. I screamed at her that she wasn't my mother and never would be. I spent 3 years waiting for her to give me back like everyone else did, and I did everything I could think of to make her do it, because I wanted to get the leaving over with before it could hurt me more. She was crying now, but her voice was steady. Mine was gone entirely. I had my hand over my mouth in the 7th row. "But here's the thing nobody told me could happen," Riley said. "She didn't leave. I threw everything at her, and she just stayed. She came and found me at a bus station at 2 in the morning. She slept in a hospital chair for 3 nights when I was sick, because in every other house, when I got sick, they left me at the doctor and someone from the agency picked me up. Nobody ever stayed. She stayed. Every single time, she stayed. She adopted me knowing I might never love her back, and she stayed anyway because..." And she told me this once, and I'll never forget it. She said she wasn't there as a reward for good behavior. She was there because she was my family, and that was a fact I couldn't lose. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her gown. The whole auditorium was crying now. 400 people, strangers, all of them. For 3 years, there was one word I couldn't say to her. I could let her in eventually. I could trust her, eventually. But I couldn't say this one word, because in my whole life, that word had never once been safe. Every time I'd let myself think it about someone, they gave me back, and it broke something, and I swore I'd never think it again. So I never said it, for 3 years. And Riley looked at me, in the 7th row, with tears streaming down her face, and she said into the microphone in front of 400 people, "So I want to say it now, out loud, where I can't take it back. So she knows it's real, and it's permanent, and she can't lose it either. Because she taught me that's what family is, it's the thing you can't lose." She looked right at me, and she said, "Thank you for staying. I love you, Mom." Mom. 3 years, 11 placements, 1 backpack set down on a shelf. And my daughter said the word from a stage in front of 400 people so that it would be permanent, so that it could never be taken back, so that I would know it was real. I don't remember standing up. I remember being on my feet. I remember the entire auditorium on its feet around me, 400 people applauding and crying. And I remember Riley coming down off the stage. She just walked off. Mid-ceremony, the principal let her go, and I remember meeting her in the aisle. And my daughter, 17 years old, put her arms around me and held on in front of everyone, the way she could not let me hold her for 2 years, and she said it again, quietly. Just to me this time, I love you, Mom. And I said what I had been waiting 3 years to have earned the right to say back. I love you too. I've got you. I've always got you. I want to tell you what happened after the graduation ceremony ended, because the microphone moment was the public thing. But the private thing that happened an hour later is the one I hold closest. We went home after the ceremony, just the two of us. Kate and the family were meeting us later for dinner, and Riley was quiet in the car, wrung out from what she'd done, from saying the word in front of 400 people. And when we got home, she went to the living room, to the shelf where the backpack had been living for 3 months, and she picked it up. And for a second, my heart stopped, because the backpack coming off the shelf had, for 11 years, meant one thing: leaving. But she didn't put it on. She brought it to the couch, and she sat down and she opened it, and she took out the photograph, the creased one, of her birth mother holding her as a baby, and she looked at it for a long time. And then she said, without looking up, "I've been thinking about her a lot today. My first mom. Is that okay? To think about her today, when and she gestured at everything, the ceremony, the word she'd given me. And I sat down next to her, and I said the truest thing I know about this, the thing I had been waiting 3 years to have the standing to say. Riley, you don't have a limited amount of mom. It's not like there's only room for one, and if you love her, there's less for me. She's the reason you exist. She gave you life and then she lost you, and that's a tragedy, and you're allowed to grieve her and love her and wonder about her for the rest of your life. And none of that takes anything away from us. I'm not in competition with a photograph. I'm honored to share you with her. She's part of you, so she's part of us." And Riley started to cry. The good kind again. And she said she'd be glad, I think, that someone finally stayed. I used to be so angry at her for losing me. But today I just feel like, I wish I could tell her it turned out okay. That I found someone who stayed, she'd want to know that. And I said, then tell her, out loud, I'll sit with you. And my daughter held the photograph of the woman who gave her life, and she said quietly to her birth mother, 17 years and 11 placements later, "It turned out okay. Someone stayed. You can stop worrying. I'm home." And then she put the photograph back in the backpack, gently. And she put the backpack back on the shelf, and she leaned against me on the couch, and we sat there in the quiet of a house she no longer had to be afraid of leaving. That's the moment. Not the microphone, the couch. After, when she grieved her first mother in the arms of her second, and understood that love is not a fixed quantity that runs out, that a heart can hold a birth mother and an adoptive mother and a rescue dog and a whole future all at once, that nothing true has to be lost to make room for something else true. She learned that on the couch that afternoon. It took her 3 years to have a heart safe enough to learn it in. Riley starts college in the fall. She's going to study social work. She wants to be the person in the system that she needed and mostly didn't have. She wants to be the one who tells the teenagers that someone might stay. I did not suggest it. She chose it herself, and I have never been prouder of anything in my life. The backpack still lives on the shelf in the living room. She never picked it back up. Sometimes I catch her looking at it, and I know she's remembering the 11 houses and the 2 families who sent her back and the girl who collected objects because no one was keeping the record of her. But she doesn't carry it anymore. She doesn't need proof that she existed before, because she has proof that she exists now. A home she didn't have to leave. A mother who stayed. A word she finally got to say out loud. I want to tell you about Kate, my sister, and how she came around, because I mentioned she apologized, and the story of how she got there matters, because Kate represents everyone who ever loved you and doubted your choice at the same time. And there are a lot of those people, and they are not your enemies. Kate did not come around quickly. For the whole first year, she was quietly, carefully waiting for me to admit she'd been right. She never said it, but I could hear it in her calls. "How's it going?" with a specific weight on the going, and implied, "Are you ready to admit this was a mistake yet?" And I couldn't give her the reassurance I wanted to give her, because there wasn't any yet. The first year was as hard as she'd predicted, and I was too proud and too scared to tell her how hard, because telling Kate would have felt like conceding. The thaw started at the hospital. Kate came to the hospital when Riley was sick. She showed up, because whatever her doubts, she's my sister and she loves me, and she came when I was scared, and she saw me sleeping in the chair, and she saw Riley's face when Riley woke up and found me still there, and something shifted in Kate that day. She didn't say anything, but she started calling differently after that. The weight came off the going. And the real turn, the apology came in the third year, at a family dinner, when Riley did something small that undid Kate completely. Kate has a daughter, my niece, who was 9 at the time, and the 9-year-old was upset about something, crying at the table, and before any adult could respond, Riley, 17, 3 years into being loved, got up and went and sat with the 9-year-old and comforted her, gently, expertly, with the specific tenderness of someone who knew exactly what it felt like to be a crying kid that the adults were talking over. And Kate watched her guarded, broken niece by adoption comfort her own daughter with more emotional skill than most adults have. And Kate got up from the table and went into the kitchen. And I followed her. And she was crying, and she said, "I was so wrong, Nora. I was so wrong about her. Look at her. Look at what I told you not to do this." I called her broken. And she's the most, and she couldn't finish. And here's what I want you to hear, because it's the generous part and the true part. I didn't gloat, and I didn't hold it against her, because Kate's doubt had never been cruelty. It had been fear for me, dressed up as wisdom, which is what a lot of doubt is. The people who tell you not to do the hard, risky, loving thing are usually not against the thing, they're scared of what it'll cost you. Kate didn't want me hurt. She was wrong about the risk, but she was right to worry, because it was a real risk and it could have gone the other way. I hugged my sister in the kitchen and I said, "You weren't wrong to worry. You were just wrong about her, and you get to love her now." That's allowed. And she does. Kate adores Riley now, is helping her shop for college, cried harder than I did at graduation. The whole thing. People are allowed to doubt you and then grow. Don't make them pay forever for being scared for you. And I think about my sister Kate, who told me not to do it, who has since apologized in tears, and who adores Riley for the record. People can be wrong and then grow. That's allowed. I think about what Kate said. She's broken, you're not equipped, she'll make your life hell and then leave. She was broken. I wasn't fully equipped, nobody is, you learn as you go. She did for a while make my life hell. But she didn't leave. And neither did I. And that turned out to be the whole thing. That was the entire secret. The only equipment I really needed. The decision to stay and stay and stay, until the staying finally became something she could believe. There is something I want to say to the people who are on the other side of this, not the ones considering adopting, but the ones who were Riley, the ones who grew up in the system, who got sent back, who learned that nobody keeps you. Because I have thought a great deal over these 3 years about what it was like to be inside Riley's experience, and I have something to say to anyone who lived it. You were not broken. I need you to hear that from someone who loved one of you all the way through to the other side. The word broken got used about my daughter, in her file, by my own sister, by the whole apparatus of a system that failed her 11 times and it was wrong. Riley was not broken. Riley was doing exactly what a smart, resilient child does when she is handed to 11 families and sent back by 2. She protected herself. She stopped hoping, because hoping had a track record of destroying her. She kept a distance, because distance had kept her alive. She refused to say the word mom, because that word had never once been safe. Every single thing that got labeled as her being broken or unable to bond was actually her being extraordinarily good at surviving an unsurvivable situation. The guardedness wasn't damage, it was armor. And armor is not a defect. Armor is what you wear when the world has proven it will hurt you. And taking it off is not something you can be talked into. It's something that happens, slowly, only when you finally find a place safe enough to set it down. If you are one of the ones who is still wearing the armor, hear me. The fact that you can't trust easily is not proof that something is wrong with you. It's proof that you learned the correct lesson from what happened to you. And it does not mean you will never be able to let someone in. It means the person who gets in will have to earn it, over a long time, by staying, and that person exists. And when they prove themselves, the armor can come down. And you are just as capable of love as anyone who never needed armor at all. Maybe more. Riley loves harder than anyone I know, precisely because she knows exactly what it's worth. And to the ones considering being the person who stays, the person who adopts the teenager everyone says not to adopt, or fosters the kid nobody wants, or loves anyone who has been taught that love is temporary, hear this: you do not have to be a saint, and you do not have to be perfectly equipped, and you do not have to have it figured out. I was none of those things. I was a single veterinarian who knew how to sit outside a kennel and wait. That turned out to be enough because the only real qualification is the willingness to stay, to keep showing up past the testing, past the pushing, past the point where quitting would be understandable, until the staying itself becomes the thing that heals. You don't have to fix them. You're not there to fix them. You are there to stay. The staying is the fix. The staying is the whole thing. I want to leave you with one last thing. Something that happened 2 weeks ago, as Riley was packing for college, because it closed a circle I didn't even know was still open. She was sorting through her room, deciding what to take, and I was helping, and we came to the shelf with the backpack. And Riley picked it up and she looked at it for a long moment, and then she looked at me and she said, "I think I want to take it with me. Not to carry, just to have." Is that weird? And I said it wasn't weird at all, and then she said something that stopped me, but I want to add something to it first, before I go. And she went to her desk, and she got a piece of paper, and she wrote something on it, and she folded it up, and she put it in the backpack, with the hospital bracelet, and the photograph, and the gray rabbit, and all the salvaged objects from 11 houses that didn't keep her. And I asked her what she'd written, and she hesitated, and then she said, "It's the program from graduation, with my name on it, as the speaker. I wanted it in there because..." And she stopped and then she got it out. For 11 years, everything in this bag was something I saved from a place I had to leave. Proof I existed before wherever I was going next. Every object is a place that didn't keep me. She held up the folded program. This is the first thing going in the bag that's proof of a place that did keep me. I wanted the bag to finally have one of those. So it's not just full of leaving anymore. 11 years, that backpack held only evidence of abandonment, a museum of every family that let her go. And my daughter, 17 years old, about to leave for college as a whole and loved person, added the first artifact of belonging. Proof of a place that kept her. Proof of a mother who stayed. She rebalanced the entire archive of her life with one folded piece of paper. The bag isn't a record of leaving anymore. It's a record of a girl who was left 11 times and then, finally, wasn't. She's taking it to college. It's going to sit on a shelf in her dorm room, the way it sat on a shelf in our living room, not carried, not clutched, just there. A whole childhood of leaving. And now at the top of the pile, the thing that says, "And then someone stayed and it changed everything." And here is the proof. I drove her to campus last week. I helped her carry her boxes up 3 flights of stairs. And when it was time to go, she hugged me for a long time in the parking lot, the girl who couldn't let me touch her for 2 years, and she said, "Thank you for staying, Mom." Which is the sentence I have come to understand that she is going to say to me for the rest of both our lives, because it is the truest thing between us and it never stops being true. And I said, "Thank you for letting me, that was the brave part. I just showed up. You're the one who finally opened the door." And I drove home to a house that felt empty in the specific way a house feels when someone you love has grown up enough to leave it. Not abandoned, the good kind of empty, the kind that means you did your job. Duke was waiting by the door. He misses her too. But here is the thing about a kid who was terrified for 3 years that I would leave. She calls me every single day from college. Every day. Because the staying went both directions in the end. I stayed until she believed it. And now she stays in touch every day. Not out of fear anymore, but because she finally has the one thing 11 families and a broken system tried and failed to convince her she'd never have. A home that stays home even when you're 3 hours away. A mother who's still there when you call. A word, Mom, that turned out to be permanent after all. She said it into a microphone so she couldn't take it back. She was right that it's permanent. She just had the reason slightly wrong. It's not permanent because she said it in front of 400 people. It's permanent because it was true, and it had been true, quietly on both sides. Since a Saturday in September 3 years ago, when a scared 14-year-old walked into my house carrying everything she owned in a faded purple backpack. And I decided, before I had any idea what it would cost or whether it would work, that whatever happened, I was going to stay. I stayed. She's home. That's the whole story. That was always going to be the whole story. I just had to be willing to wait 3 years for her to be able to tell it. If someone in your life is sure you're going to leave, hear this. Some people have been left so many times that they cannot hear the promise, "I'll stay." The words mean nothing to them. They've heard the words before from people who left. You cannot convince them with words. You can only convince them with time, with showing up and showing up. And showing up, past the testing and the pushing and the running, past the point where anyone else would have quit, until one day the staying has gone on so long that it becomes the first true thing they have ever been able to count on. It is the hardest thing I have ever done. It took 3 years. And I would do all 3 years again for the 90 seconds at that microphone. Don't give up on the ones who are sure you will. That certainty is not rejection. It's a wound, and the only medicine is to stay until it heals. Drop one word in the comments that describes how this story made you feel. Just one word. Tell me where you're listening from. I read every comment. Share this with someone who needs to hear that staying matters, because it does, more than almost anything. Hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.